So you finally got the interview. You updated your resume. You applied to jobs that you are excited about in a new field, and somebody called you back. But now you're panicking because you just know that they are going to ask you questions about your career change, and you don't know how to answer those questions without either sounding desperate or unqualified, or like you are just trying to escape your current job. Well, you are in the right place because I got you. Interviewing is not about being perfect. It's about personality and being prepared. And in this video, I am going to share with you the 3 mistakes that can take you out of the running after an interview as a career changer. And for each mistake, I'm also going to share exactly how to fix them so that you can ace your interview. If you are new here, hi. And if you are a regular viewer, welcome back. I'm Dr. Tega. I'm a career coach who helps professional women leave soul-sucking, draining jobs that they don't like and land higher paying, more fulfilling careers that they can thrive in by helping them clarify their next career move and job search without burning out. Let's get into today's video. All right, we're going to jump right in. Mistake number 1 is not addressing your gaps proactively. So if you're making a career change, there's a high chance that you have some gaps. That's just natural. Whether it is gaps in terms of tools that you have never used or skills that you don't have, or maybe a methodology that you've never used before that are required for the job. And if you don't go into the interview being ready to talk about your awareness of those gaps and how you are going to fill those gaps, you are going to be at a disadvantage in the interview because it's going to come up. It is going to come up. They are likely going to ask you about those gaps, especially if, again, the gap is related to something specific that you actually need to be successful in the role. So, for example, imagine that you're making a pivot into a role that requires a CRM. So, like a client relationship management system. And they might look at your history and they've looked at your resume, right? They've looked at your LinkedIn profile and they're like, okay, this person doesn't have experience using this specific tool or this specific software that we use. So in the interview, they might ask you, right? They might say something like, so I see from your experience, or I see that you don't have experience with our CRM system. How do you plan to get up to speed? Or something along those lines. And if you're not prepared, you're going to freeze. Because you don't have experience with their CRM, you're going to, in the moment, just try to come up with an answer on the spot that doesn't make you sound competent and qualified for the role. And you might find yourself saying something like, well, I'm a really fast learner. I pick up new systems pretty quickly. And that answer is fine, but it's not great. And you're likely going to end up feeling defensive because you're trying to defend the gap that you know is there. And you are reacting to their concern instead of addressing it proactively. And the reason why this mistake can really kill your chances is that when you don't address the gaps that you have, the hiring manager is likely spending the entire interview wondering, can this person actually do the job? And if they're sitting there wondering if you can do their job, right? Wondering about your competence, they're not sold on you. They're not bought into you. They are skeptical, and skepticism does not lead to job offers. So here's exactly how you can fix this problem. Be ready to answer that question about the gap. And if they don't bring it up, you need to be ready to bring it up. Don't leave that interview with them still having doubts or unanswered questions about you. So when they ask about the tool or a skill, your response needs to do 3 specific things. First, show that you have specific knowledge about the tool they're asking about. Second, show that you know what that tool is used for and why it is important for your specific role. And third, demonstrate how you plan to accommodate for that gap and how you're going to accommodate for that gap quickly in the first 30 to 60 days in the role. So don't just say something like, I've heard of this tool or I know I need it. Show them that you've actually taken time to learn what it is and how it works. So to give you a more concrete example, let's say you're interviewing for a role that required experience with multiple learning management systems, so LMS platforms. So think things like Workday, Cornerstone, those kinds of systems. And you don't have experience with them, okay? You know you can do the training work, but not with the specific systems, and they ask about it in the interview. Your response could sound something like this. Great question. While I don't have direct experience with Workday or Cornerstone, I have researched extensively how both systems work. And from what I've learned, I recognize that Workday handles employee onboarding and training, tracking, and it integrates with HR systems to automate compliance training. Now, while Cornerstone is stronger for building learning paths and skills assessment, and I will say that I recognize how both of these systems are important for tracking program participant progress and ensuring that our staff complete required certifications on time. I also understand the basics of how both Workday and Cornerstone function, and I know that I can get up to speed really quickly because I've learned multiple new systems before in every role that I've had. My specific plan with this role is to complete the Workday Learning Administrator certification in my first 30 days in this role so that I can begin building out our quarterly training curriculum and tracking completion metrics as soon as possible. I will say I am curious though, is my lack of direct experience with these specific platforms a deal breaker for the role? Can you see how all three things are in that response? In fact, let me break it down. Okay, I'm going to break down why that response works because I don't want you to just memorize a script, right? I don't want you to try to duplicate that response. I want you to understand the structure so that you can build your own version for whatever gap, because your gap might be a skill and not a tool. So this example actually came from one of my clients. So I'm going to refer to her as I talk about this. So when she says Workday handles employee onboarding and training tracking, that shows that she has specific knowledge about the tool, right? She didn't just say, I've heard of Workday or I watched YouTube videos. She explained what exactly it does. And notice I know she did, right? She pulled this from the tool's website and from researching what companies, this was a nonprofit, so what kind of things nonprofits use this tool for. And that's homework that you can do before the interview, right? You can research the tool, you can research the skill so that you can talk about your knowledge of knowing what it is used for. Then, important for tracking program participant progress and ensuring staff complete required certifications. That part of the response shows that she knows why it matters for this specific role at this type of organization. So again, it was a nonprofit, and nonprofits often have to prove that training happened to be in compliance with their grants. She knows that. So what she's doing is connecting the tool to the business priorities. If this were a corporate role, she might say something like, important for scaling onboarding across multiple departments, right? The tool is the same. She would just connect it to the business context. Okay. Then the other part of the response is, my plan is to complete the Workday Learning Administrator certification in my first 30 days. Notice how that is a concrete action plan. She's not saying, I'll figure it out. She's not saying, I'm a fast learner. She's saying, here's the specific training I will complete, and here's the timeline that I plan to complete it in. That removes the risk for them because they know exactly how she's going to close the gap. And then she closes with, so that I can begin building out our quarterly training curriculum and tracking completion metrics as soon as possible. This shows that she plans to be productive immediately, right? She's not just learning the system for the sake of learning it. She's learning it so she can do the actual work they hired her to do, because that statement, quarterly training curriculum, that came from the job description. So she's using their language back to them to talk about her gap. Right? And then she ends with, this question is key. Is this a deal breaker for this role? That question is critical because it forces them to think and make a decision really right there. Either it's a deal breaker and you find out now and you know that it's not going to work, or it's not and they've told you out loud that it's not and that it doesn't disqualify you. Either way, you're not leaving them with unanswered questions and you are not leaving wondering if it was a deal breaker. Okay? Then mistake number 2 is not connecting your background to this specific job. Okay. And what this can sound like in an interview is maybe they say something like, tell me about your experience with project management. Okay. And your response is, I'm a really strong project manager. I'm very organized. I work well with teams and I always meet my deadlines. and you think you answered their question, but you didn't, because that answer is generic. That answer could apply to literally anyone, and it doesn't tell them anything specific about what you actually have done in your career and can do for them. And when you're interviewing, generic answers make you forgettable among all the other applicants. When you give generic answers, the hiring manager cannot picture you in the role, right? They can't see how your past experience actually applies to the work they need done in this job they're hiring for. And when they cannot picture you doing the job, they're going to move on to the next candidate that they can picture doing that work for them. So the way that you fix that is you can use what I call the specificity principle, meaning always be as specific as possible with your examples. Concrete examples make you sound credible and memorable. Vague claims are forgettable. So instead of saying, I'm a strong project manager, you would say something like, I managed a cross-functional project where I coordinated between legal, social work, and policy teams to build an equity resource hub for our welfare attorneys. The challenge for this role was that each team had different priorities and timelines, so I had to create a project plan that aligned everyone's goals while keeping us on track for a 6-month launch deadline. Do you see the difference, right? Do you see? I'm not just saying I can do project manager. I'm showing you that I can do it. This answer is not vague. It is specific, and they remember specific. Like that example actually came from another client where she was prepping for interviews, and I would ask her like, okay, why can you do blank? And she'd be like, I'm good at problem solving. I work well under pressure. And I'm like, girl, that doesn't mean anything. Anybody can say they work well under pressure. Give me a specific example. So she told me about a project where she had to analyze practitioner needs for a resource hub for the attorneys. And that is so much more specific. And that is what we took to craft a response. Because now instead of sounding like every Tom, Dick, and Harry that is applying for this job who says, I'm a problem solver and I work well under pressure, like literally everybody works well under pressure. Right? She sounds like someone now who has done complex, high stakes work that required real skill. And that answer gets you the offer, right? Because that answer paints a picture, right? You didn't just say, I'm good at project management. You showed them that you were good at project management. In fact, the way I want you to think about this is show, don't tell, right? Don't tell them what you can do, which is, I'm good at project management. You're telling them something. Show them what you can do. Paint a picture for them by saying, I was working with these numbers of teams. This was the challenge. This is what we did. This was the results. Now you have painted a picture. You have shown them that you can do project management. Okay. That's how I want you to think about it. So the formula, right? The formula that you can use when you are trying to build out responses for your own self, especially if the question is about a specific skill set or ability, the specific situation plus what you did, plus why it mattered and what the outcome was. And if you watched my video about making your skills relevant for a job, I'll link it on the screen, then this should sound familiar because it is the same 3-question framework that I taught in that video, right? When did you do this thing? Why did it matter? What was the outcome? And that is how you make your answers specific. That's how you make yourself memorable in the interview. Now, before I share the last mistake, if you are finding this video helpful so far, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Liking this video ensures that the little YouTube gremlins share this video with more people who need to hear this information. And when you hit that subscribe button, that ensures that you never miss future videos like this that will continue helping you in your own career change and pivot. And candidly, it does help this channel grow. Thank you. And by the way, if you want the complete interview prep system with scripts for every tough question that you will likely get asked when you are making a career pivot, the Peaceful Pivot Guide has my BDA interview system that walks you exactly through how to answer these questions with scripts and formulas. You can check the description for a link to that resource. All right, let's go to mistake number 3. And number 3 is not knowing the anchor story that connects your pivot to this role. So An anchor story is a personal or professional experience that connects you emotionally to the industry or role that you're targeting, right? It's not you just saying, I'm interested in this field. It's here's the moment that made me realize I want to work in this field. It's the story that explains why you're making this change in a way that makes you sound human and believable. And once you have your anchor story, it becomes the thread that you sort of weave through every single answer in your interview, right? So you might tell the story directly, you might not, but everything you say connects back to one cohesive narrative about why you're here and why this role makes sense for you in this phase of your career. Because without an anchor story in the interview, they might ask you, so why are you interested in this role? Or why are you leaving your current field? Or why this company? And they could ask all three of those questions and you end up giving three completely different answers that don't connect to each other, because for why this role, you talk about wanting new challenges in your career. And then for why are you leaving your field, you talk about being burned out. And then for why this company, you talk about the company's mission. And none of those answers tell one cohesive story about your career change or pivot. They're just random reasons that don't really add up to anything meaningful. And when your answers don't connect, like when you're not telling a clear story, the hiring manager can start to wonder if you really thought this through, or if you're just sort of throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. When you don't have a clear, consistent story about why you're making this change, you sound uncertain, which then makes you sound like a risky hire. Right? Are you going to leave in a few months? And then now they have to start hiring for this role again, which trust me, they don't want to do. Hiring is not fun, y'all. Because if you are not even sure why you want this job, how can they be sure? Right? How is the hiring manager supposed to trust that you will stick around? So here's how you can fix this problem. Build an anchor story. Like I said earlier, an anchor story is a specific experience that gives you sort of a personal connection to the industry or the role that you're targeting. And once you have your anchor story built out, now it's the connecting line through all your answers in the interview. So for example, I had a client who was trying to pivot into insurance without any direct experience in insurance. And I remember when I first asked her, I was like, okay, why do you want to go into insurance? She was like, it's a stable field and I can do the job. I'm qualified for the analyst role. I'm like, girl, that's not a good answer. We all want a stable job. It's not enough to say that. And saying you can just do this job is also not helpful. Anybody can say that. It's not compelling. We needed an anchor story. And so when we dug deeper, asking her questions about her experience with insurance and why insurance, then she told me a story that stood out to even me that would stand out for her in the interview process. So it was pretty much just a story about how when she bought her first car, she got into an accident 9 days later. It wasn't her fault. And the car was totaled and she was stressed because just bought a new car. And now she had to start figuring out how to get to work, how to solve the issues. And her insurance company really stepped in and took care of everything for her, right? They got her a rental. They handled all the repairs. They communicated with her really well. She was not stressed because of how they handled it. And that experience, which I kind of added this part a little bit, right? That experience showed her critical insurance is good when life throws you curveballs, right? It brings peace and it protects people during stressful moments. But that is her anchor story, right? That is, why do you want to go to insurance? And now no matter what question they ask her in the interview, she can tie it back to that story, right? So if they say, why are you interested in insurance? She can be like, 9 days after I bought my first car, I got into an accident and my insurance company took care of everything. And that experience really just showed me how critical good insurance is when life gets unpredictable. Right? And she can add something in there about, I'm in a phase in my career where I want to be part of something like that, helping people in hard times, something along those lines. Or let's say they ask her why this role specifically. She can say that experience made me want to be on the other side of that process, helping people navigate their most stressful moment and making sure that they are protected. Or what if they ask the typical, what is your weakness question. She can say, while I don't have direct insurance experience yet, that accident really taught me firsthand what customers actually need when they are filing a claim. I understand the stress, I understand the uncertainty and the need for clear communication. And that perspective is something that I will bring to this role. Can you see how the anchor story connects everything? Now her answers aren't just random things she's saying in the interview. They are all part of one cohesive narrative, and that narrative is going to make her sound like someone who has thought this pivot through. Right? Not just that, when they are reviewing and thinking about all the other candidates after all their interviews, that narrative, they're going to remember it. They are going to remember that story. Now she sounds like somebody who has a genuine reason for wanting the job, not just because it's stable, right? She sounds like she's going to be committed to the job. And that is the candidate who gets the offer. So here's what I want you to do. If you're making a pivot, think about your pivot. What is the experience that made you interested in this new industry or role? Maybe it was a problem that you saw that you wanted to solve. Maybe it was something that you experienced personally that gave you new insight into the industry. Maybe it was a project that you worked on that made you realize you wanted to do more of that kind of work. Whatever it is, doesn't really matter. That's your anchor story. And when you have your anchor story, you can now sort of use it in your interviews and keep repeating it throughout your answers and make it the through line that connects everything you say back to a deeper reason why you want to make this career change. If you implement those 3 fixes, you will absolutely nail your next career change interview, because when you address gaps proactively, you're taking away their biggest concerns. Okay. You show that you have self-awareness. You show that you know how to take initiative, and you make them feel like they're not making a risk by hiring you. When you connect your background to the specific job with concrete, specific examples, you make yourself memorable. Okay, you prove that you can do the work. You make it easy for them to picture you in the role. And finally, when you know your anchor story and you thread your anchor story through all your answers, or the answers that it makes sense, you sound strategic, you sound committed to the role. And now you are coming across as someone who has thought this through, right? Like you're not just making a change on a whim. And that is exactly why they want this job, like that you want this job at this company. And those 3 things will help you stand out as a career changer in the job market. So now that you know the 3 mistakes that can really kill your chances in a career change interview, and you know exactly how to fix those 3 changes, the reality is interviewing is just one part of making a successful career pivot. You also need to make sure your resume is positioning you correctly in the first place. You need to know how to identify and talk about your transferable skills. And you need to make sure that you're not making the biggest mistake of all in a career pivot, which is picking a job based on what you can do instead of what you actually want to do, because that's how you end up burned out in a new job in 6 months. Okay. So that's exactly why I created the Peaceful Pivot Guide. The guide walks you through my entire CLARE framework. It's a 5-step framework for making a career change that actually leads to you landing work you love. In that guide, you get my 3-part pivot story framework so you can build your own anchor story. You get my BDA interview system that has scripts for tough questions, and you get the complete system for preparing for interviews, handling objections in the interviews, and positioning yourself as the right candidate instead of a risky hire. This guide was built specifically for professional women who are wanting to change careers and need a clear and strategic plan to land a higher paying job that they actually love. You can go to pivotwithpeace.com to grab your copy today, or if you just go to the description, you can tap that link in the description below to learn more about the guide and grab your copy today. Thank you for sticking around and watching this video all the way to the end. I hope that you found it helpful. If you have any questions at all about interviews as a career changer, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. I genuinely enjoy answering questions. And if you did find this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below so that way you don't miss future videos that can continue to help you as you're making your career pivot. And once you hit the like, subscribe, and notify buttons below, don't click away, because guess what? There is another video popping up on the screen right here, just right here. Go ahead and tap that video. Watch that video so that I can continue supporting you in your career.